Hey up! I'm Guy Kesterman, the Tester Man. And the question I'm answering today is, how much shock can a shock stop stop if a shock stop can stop shocks? Because the piece of kit on test is the Redshift Sports Shockstop suspension stem. Well, before we get into the whys and wherefores of suspension stems, suspension forks, and the whole question of suspension on drop bar gravel bikes, if you just hit that subscription button, that'll be a huge help, because the vast majority of people watching these videos still haven't subscribed yet, and that's a big kick up the arse for YouTube to share my videos more if that number grows. And if you also give a round of applause and potentially some purchasing towards my industry sponsors, and a big thanks to my Patreon investors too. We pledge on a monthly basis and they get ad-free, exclusive and early edits as a thank you, and they're vital for keeping this GoPro rolling and the channel going. So before we get into performance, let's just cover off the basic stats. You're looking at a fairly simple square section body, 4-bolt faceplate with a single pivot on it. It's not a parallelogram linkage or anything like that, like the Cane Creek silk stem. It's basically a hinge with a choice of 5 different elastomers squeezed in behind a preload block to tune it for different rider weights. It maxes out at 135 kilos rider weight if you're on the heavier side of things. And having played around with it, they're a bit of a faff to get the elastomers in and out. But I've actually gone back to the original. In warmer weather, I actually switched to one of the firm elastomers to stop it bouncing a lot. But now things have cooled down to sort of single-digit degrees, I've gone back to the OG elastomers to give it a bit more support off the top. And that just about lets me bottom it out from time to time. And in terms of travel, it's got 20 mil of movement at the stem. I mean, I'm not sure what length they do it at. That's one of the big advantages of this Redshift. It comes in a very wide range of lengths now. They've just introduced a 55 and the 70 I'm testing here. But for 70, they go all the way up to 120 in 10 mil increments. And then they do higher rise stems in 80 and 100 as well. So obviously once you're down on the, especially if you're out on the hoods, that leverage means travel in terms of your hands is nearer double that, so 40, 50 mil. So in theory, that's equivalent to the travel of a suspension fork. But it delivers that movement very differently. I mean, basically, you'll see it's just my hands kind of bouncing up and down, and it is pretty much bouncing because there is a small rebound bumper in this Redshift, but it is pretty small, so you know, it's not soaking up much energy. How do cows? There's some proper handlebars on those. So you know, these are certainly, once you get bouncing over stuff, it's, you know, it's not a complete pogo, but I'll be doing a review of the USE Vibe stem, which actually has adjustable damping, and you can definitely settle that down more. And that bar tip does feel slightly weird at first, because your initial reaction is that the bars have actually slipped at in the stem. And also, where you have your hand on the bars obviously makes a big difference to how much leverage and therefore how soft the stem actually feels. So out there on the hoods, even though this is a relatively short reach bar, you're getting maximum leverage, so it feels pretty plush, pretty smooth. On the tops, not really much at all. Can you remember this G2? When I reviewed it, I said bar tape was a little thin and the fork was quite firm. So there is some cushion in there for sure. kind of like running a bigger diameter tyre. But compared to being out front, you know, when you're hitting sizable stuff, that's obviously much more leverage, much smoother. Although, again, when you do hit bigger holes, you're more likely to push through the travel. And when you're at the saddle, you can see, I don't know if you can, maybe I'm too far back, but there's noticeably more movement on the hoods. So, you know, you're definitely noticeable. Oh, and the other thing, if you're in the drops, and this is something I haven't seen anyone else mention with these stems, the way your weight goes through the bar, I haven't worked out the exact physics of it yet, but it definitely seems like there's not just because where your hand is in relation to the bar pivot, but also just the fact that your hands are further back, lower down, and you're kind of pushing the bar forward like that. That seems to lock the stem out a lot compared to being, oh god, yeah, I mean the difference is night and day between being on the drops and being on the tops, which is ridiculous that I've never seen that mentioned in a review, because I mean that applies to all suspension stems, but you know, definitely a lot smoother. I'm deliberately running down the chunk in the middle of the track here, and you know, it's a smoother, more connected ride, although that whole kind of uncontrolled bounce thing does make me feel a bit squeamish, a bit queasy. If you're used to being connected and having a consistent hand position, it's a little bit weird. And obviously it's only suspending you, whereas a fork is suspending everything but the front wheel. But then this isn't changing the handling geometry, it's just changing your hand geometry. And the biggest point, obviously, is this stem, $189.99, although there's Black Friday sale at the moment, and just north of 200 grams, depending on which length you get. Whereas the suspension fork, obviously depending on brand, but something like a RockShox Rudy has an 800 quid fork, and it's knocking on 1,300 grams, so totally different in terms of price and how much weight they add to your bike. Plus, obviously, you can add a suspension stem to pretty much any bike, because I mean they do oversized versions for Giant and other oversized Steerer Canyon, I think it is, other oversized Steerer bikes, and you can just bolt the stem on. You know, there's no question about adding 40mm to the stack height of the fork like there is a suspension fork, and throwing all of that out. And once you've chosen your elastomer, then you know it's fit and forget, you're good to go. And the great news is this has got a really good reputation for reliability. You know, I've had no worries about bolts coming loose. It's actually the little bit, I mean, it's always hard to separate kind of up and down bounce from twist, but it doesn't feel like it's sloppy or loose and rattly in any way. And although you can definitely feel that bottom out, even on a cold day like today, you know, it's not, there's no nasty clunk or clank. And same with the top out as well. You know, it doesn't feel clunky, it just feels smoother, it really does, you know. And that goes from rolling along back roads when you're not really paying attention, you hit a stone or a pothole or whatever, to proper full-on chunky descents. You know, it really does soak up a noticeable amount of trauma, and that's going to improve your comfort over longer rides as well. So I'm kind of not surprised that I think there's 900, actually knocking on 1,000 reviews on the Redshift website. I think it averages a 4.9. Now, somebody really upset the apple cart with complaints about US or UK pricing or something, put a 1 in, so probably much nearer a 5. She screened that one out. And they seem to have really good customer feedback, which is always a good thing, especially when it's something that connects your bars to your bike. Because I don't know if you've seen our trip on the gravel tandem last time with the USE stem, ended up disastrously when that stem came in half. So I am retesting another sample at stem, and I will get back with a head-to-head comparison between the two, but short notes are, this feels a little more solid, but it's also slightly heavier, and outside of Black Friday sales, slightly more expensive too. Plus, now this is more of a pogo, whereas the USE has more tunable sort of ride feel to it. But then this comes in a lot more sizes. Hey up, don't normally meet traffic down here. But if you're going to pick a vehicle, it'll be a 4x4 Volvo Estate. And that's kind of what, actually that's not a bad allegory actually. If putting a suspension fork on your gravel bike is like getting a proper 4x4, putting a suspension stem is more like kind of getting your classic estate car with a slightly lifted 4x4 for that pheasant exploder chic that those country folks seem to love. But just that little bit more comfort, capability, oh, let's go for the full alliteration, and control when things are rougher. And obviously, as you kind of have to say with all gravel reviews, if you're running it in town, it just gives that extra bit of peace of mind. Whee, look at that, see, I can just, you know, I'm not worried about smacking into holes like that, you know, there's no wrist jarring, or it's just that little bit of extra suspension and smoothness. Not just the expected stuff, but like I was saying, you know, it's really leafy at the moment and clobbering rocks and roots you don't see, and it's just like, whoa. Especially if, you know, just those moments that like can catch you out, like you're riding one-handed, getting a drink or taking a selfie, whatever, and you suddenly clunk something. That's when a gravel bike can have you off. But having that little bit, but certainly noticeable travel really does help. I'm just rattling on here now, aren't I? I'm rattling on about the fact I'm not rattling. So I should probably do a conclusion. I realised that last section, it was a summary anyway, really. Suspension stems are not suspension forks, but there's a whole load of pros and cons that come with that, particularly in terms of how affordable, how easy to fit, and how light they are in terms of providing a noticeable upgrade in your comfort and your control. But suspension stems, you know, you're only changing the bar geometry, and that difference between tops, hoods and drops is really, really dramatic. So depending on where you ride, you're going to need to tune your elastomers to suit whether you're on the hoods all the time like I am, or whether you're in the drops or the tops, because you have to run softer and then just put up with more bounce when you're on the hoods. And that's something that nobody talks about. It just, but then again, what can I say? I was trying to be as thorough as possible reviews rather than just gushing about stuff. But on the plus side, you know, it feels like a very solid stem structurally. It's got great reviews for reliability, and it comes in a ton of sizes compared to other options. But if you do click that subscribe button and click the notifications button, you'll see me reviewing that USE Vibe stem pretty shortly. But for now, I've been Guy Kesteven on Guykest TV, feeling a lot like I've gone back into the 90s when a bit of bounce between you and your bike was considered a very big deal and did actually make a difference. Now, if only someone brings out an Onza Porcupine gravel tyre Now that I would be frothing for.